Buenos días. Welcome. Bienvenidos. The Center for Latino Policy Research is honored to welcome Luis Valdez on occasion of his UC Regents lectureship residency on our campus. We also welcome Luis Valdez to our campus too. My name is Patricia Baquedano Lopez. I'm faculty at the Graduate School of Education and I'm chair of the center. I was born in Yucatan. I greet you in the language of my ancestors. Kimak Inwol Inwilikich. Very happy to see you. Luis Valdez has graciously agreed to meet with students in the course Education 188, Latinas, Latinos, and Education. And the instructor for the course, Teresa Buroet Stone, a graduate student at the Graduate School of Education, is here. I welcome all of you to our center. I know that there are other students who are also interested in education. Welcome everyone. Luis Valdez is an internationally recognized playwright and director and founder of the renowned company El Teatro Campesino. He really needs no introduction. But let me just say that initially created in 1965, Teatro Campesino was to use theater to raise consciousness among farm workers, and it became a major force in the transformation of American theater of the 20th century. The company's work from the California Central Valley imbued theater with human and cultural familiarity, using improvisational works and theatrical short plays performed on the picket lines, at rallies, and at organizing events to support the farm workers' movement. I just want to say also that we all know his work as well from having produced several award-winning films, full-length plays and major films, including Sud Sud and La Bamba, and inspired generations of artists dedicated to political and social change. At Tuesday's lecture, we heard a narrative about becoming interested in theater, about Luis Valdez becoming interested in theater, and how it all started in school, with a teacher and a paper bag. But there was more than just this set of actors and objects. There were social conditions that, as was explained in this example, that has shaped his life and continue to shape the lives and educational trajectories of so many Chicanas and Chicanos. Those conditions for us in education are important to understand, shape, alter, and transform. I cannot help but connect how. That's the power of zero happening back there. How education can be like theater. Education can be like theater, real in its engagement of both the everydayness of life and the magnitude of the social, what it means to be a community, how to understand and fight racism and discrimination, all represented and enfleshed in dialogue and performance. Education like theater needs to continue to be a catalyst for change in its creativity and transformative potential. Today, we also remember the 43 students in Ayotzinapa and demand that in the land that is ours too, for so many, the land where we were born, that is the land of so many of our families, that we also demand change. No more, basta. And I believe that educators, not forgetting that the 43 in Ayotzinapa were young students and teachers in training, have a key role in making that change happen, to move the world with the power of zero. This is Teresa's class, and I know that she has some thoughts and to help guide conversation today, so I will turn it over to her.
Thank you so much, Professor Baquedano Lopez. And again, we welcome you, and we're really excited that you're here with us today. And there's so much of your work over the span of the 50 and 52 years to come that will inform us and help us think further about how to live our lives and how to consider education and how to work towards that social change that we are inspired to achieve and to just be in the process of. our class has been working on several themes over the course of the semester, and I checked in with them this morning to kind of make sure that these are the ideas that seem pertinent and relevant right now to hopefully be able to gain even more from your expertise and experiences. So I'm going to just share those themes in hopes that you can address some of them and help us think through them. So the first one is this idea of retaining hope, even as we deepen our understandings of repressive educational contexts. Sometimes as we learn more and more, it's easy to feel bogged down by the heaviness of the world. And so how do we retain the hope that brings us into these spaces in the first place? How do we hold on to it? How do we grow it? How do we build it together? So that's the first thing that we've been kind of grappling with, and things that students have shared with me about, this is a lot, what do we do now? The second theme is a sense of connecting inner growth and decolonization of the self with creating and engaging with collectivity and community. And so how do we kind of bridge those inner processes that we're advised by so many wise elders to do with the work that we need to do together collectively? How do we make sense of those inner impressions that have become so real and that we live out in our actions, but also that we want to deconstruct and build with others in order to address in wider society. The third theme is how to connect people from different groups and backgrounds to support common or related causes, and the ways that we've come together as a class to address different issues and to think about them together, and to build from our sometimes similar and sometimes very disparate experiences in order to come to understandings of one another, of the world, and of the educational spaces that we interrogate. And lastly, and this was actually articulated by Sarah, she articulated this sense, another idea that we've been talking about and working with, is the role of all of these ideas in the formal spaces of education, in the classroom. How is it that we can bring these ideas to the work that we do? Because so often when we think about education as education for social change, then we're forced to look at the rest of education as that is often very reproductive and repressive. And so how do we focus on the social change within spaces that are not necessarily meant for that purpose? And how to have hope in that. So these are a lot of big questions and ideas that we've been grappling with over the course of the semester, and with the help of some of your ideas and thoughts and inspirations. So we're really happy to welcome you. Please join me in welcoming Luis Valdez.
Thank you, Teresa, Patricia. Mi honor, mi placer estar aquí con ustedes. Thank you for inviting me to speak to your class. I'm not going to use the podium. I'm just going to stand over here and speak. Actually, I was just noticing the symbol here, the Center for Latino Policy and Research. Or is it?
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, I spoke about the power of zero, the mind zero, and this is it also. This is another representation. El espiral, the spiral, the square, in the middle of the circle. This is Hunabku, el único dador de la medida y el movimiento, the only giver of the measure and the movement, is what the Maya called the creator of the universe. Hunabku. And again, it's very specific, very scientific, at the same time that it's religious. El único dador de la medida y el movimiento. El movimiento is circular, it's spiral, it's feminine. Y la medida is square, it's masculine. So there you have the double the gender balance in the Mayan universe, which leads to the concept of Ometeo. Now that's not what Ometeo, to God. Ometeo, so God is both male and female. Now, why is this important? It's important because we're describing the very essence of life, what life is. And I speak a lot about zero. I've been speaking to different classes, frankly, and I want to keep my focus correct, in the sense that this is about education, so I want to be able to focus on the whole process of education and on your future as teachers. And I find it a rare privilege to be able to talk to teachers that are going out into the field, okay? Because you're all going into the trenches. And I want you to know that you're needed. Your skills and what you're learning here are absolutely needed in the community. What you are learning here, what you are about to do as you go out into your careers, is about saving lives. There's a lot of lives that are being destroyed for this, because of ignorance, because of self-hatred, because of imposed oppression from outside the community, so that they can better exploit, the people in the community. And it seems to me often that the only key, the only way out, is through education. And in order to have education, you got to have teachers. It's as simple as that. So I know Teresa postulated a number of questions that I think we can entertain. Certainly I can entertain them, because I too am a teacher, have been, for the last 50 years. But the zero, the mind zero here, is important. One definition is very, very spiritual, at the same time that it is extremely practical, and it is one of the ways that we can begin to solve some of our problems. We've got to understand how reality functions. Now you come to a major university here. I'm sure you've been exposed to the sciences, you've been exposed to the arts, the humanities, as well as all of the natural and physical sciences. The objective is for you to understand life, to understand reality, how it is that functions. I find that there are tremendous gaps in world education. And as a Chicano, speaking as a son of Mexicanos, I found that the big gap is that no one is really teaching the roots of American culture. No one is really teaching Mayan culture. And now that we're in the Sexto Sol, and have been since December 21st, 2012, now that we're in the Sexto Sol, it's very important that you especially embrace these concepts and begin to utilize them in your work. And we will share them with the world, because that's what they're meant to. Share them with all the rest of the world's knowledge. It's nothing special. There's no one has a monopoly on the truth. There are many, many different ways. There are many paths to the Creator. But certainly we have a right to feel complete by connecting to our own roots. And particularly since our own roots can be so nurturing to everybody. So we have zero here. And what is zero? Zero, the mind zero. Zero is a full emptiness and an empty fullness. You have to understand that the universe breathes. The world breathes. It breathes in terms of the four seasons. That there's spring and summer and fall and winter. The earth breathes. The leaves come out and the leaves fall off the trees. And then the branches are bare for a while and then they spring up again. The earth breathes. There's a full emptiness and an empty fullness. The world fills up and then it empties out. Now women know this because you have menstrual cycles. You fill up and you empty out. And what you are doing when you do this is you are following the basic truth of the universe, of the zero. An empty fullness and a full emptiness. And whether we know it or not, our lives do that all the time. They fill up and they empty out. It's a little harder for men to realize that because we're hermetically sealed, but we too fill up and empty out. Fill out and empty out on a regular basis. It's a rhythm that is established. But no one has described this to us. You can look at this in a number of different ways. But let me just go back down to earth here, and we'll come back to the philosophical application. I just wanted to lay that foundation. I have been a teacher with the use of the theater as my search engine. The theater is my search engine. My search engine to discover my own origins, to discover who I am. And by consequence, who we all are. At the same time, I mean, I have also participated in education. El Teatro Campesino is going to celebrate its 50th anniversary next year. 50 years ago, 1965, we started on the picket lines of the Delano Grape strike. I knew I wanted to be a playwright. Now, there's nothing more impractical. We're talking about literally 50 years ago, 1964, when I produced my first full-length play at San Jose State. And here I am coming from a family of campesinos and migrant farm workers to begin with. How impractical a choice. How could I even pretend, that I could make a living as a playwright? That's ridiculous. And so my first year I was really majoring in math and physics in 1958 when I started college, because I knew I had to have something practical. I had something solid, So the sciences seemed to me, I can become an engineer. My parents would have been proud of me if I'd become a janitor. That would have been good. At least you don't work out in the fields, you work indoors, in the weather, and buen trabajo. Buen trabajo, mijito, ándale, métete, But I wanted something more. And so and I had good teachers, almost none of them of Latinos, almost none of them of Latin origin, of any kind. Most of them were Anglos, frankly. And thank God that there are wise teachers, it doesn't matter what the race is, I've had African-American teachers, I had Filipino teachers, I had Japanese-American teachers, in American schools. But I mean, I'm grateful to all of them. I'm grateful to all of them for educating me. And the first thing that I discovered is that the teachers that I could really connect with cared about me. They saw me as a human being. I was a little kid, maybe, but the thing is that they cared about me. But from the first grade, I told the story in Brown Bag, but Miss Ruth Tremaine, who taught me the secret of paper mache, cast me in my first play. She gave a damn about me. And then later when I got the attendance record from the superintendent who heard me speech, that little Luis Valdez had been in that school, at Stratford School, for 30 days, in and out. But in those 30 days, I had gotten hooked on the theater, but Ruth Tremaine, the teacher that I never saw again, launched me on a career. I don't know if she ever found out. I don't know if she knew what I did, what I learned in 30 days. But those 30 days were pretty important because she cared enough to cast me in my first role. Didn't matter that I was Mexican. She didn't say, can you read? She didn't say, can you act? No, I saw the audition, I did my thing, said, okay, you get the role. And she took my mother's taco bag and turned it into a mask, She created magic for me. Well, she was only the beginning, I went on to another first grade. I finished my first grade with a teacher called Miss Smiley. And Miss Smiley was a little viejita, And she discovered that I could do all my ABCs and I could count to 50. And more than that I could sing 3 blind mice in Spanish. Tres ratas ciegas, mira cómo van, mira cómo. So then she got me to sing in front of this class, and then she went over to Miss Cheeseman's class, and I get up and sing Tres ratas ciegas, tres ratas, So it was great. It was an opening. I felt good in class, But more than that, I discovered that that first year when I got the report card, they didn't have A and Bs back then. This is the 40s. They had E's and S for satisfactory, U for unsatisfactory. Did you remember that? Did you ever do that? E? Yeah. E for excellent? Okay. Well, I remember real proud. My mother was really proud because I brought home my report card, and I had 52 E's in the first grade. I didn't know what to make of it. 52 E's. Well, but it was straight A's. In my first, and because Miss Smiley had accepted me as her student, she let me sing, and she, in a sense, rewarded my intelligence. Now, my second grade teacher was not so good. My second grade teacher was really kind of insulting. You know, I felt, wait a minute, why is she not like Miss Miley? This one's, I don't remember her name. She's the only teacher of all my teachers from grammar school into high school that I don't remember her name. Blocked it out, man. I blocked it out. And because of little things that she did, and I realized she's got problems. She doesn't see me, you know, she's not teaching me. She wouldn't teach me. One time they had crayons. They handed out crayons, you're supposed to okay, yellow and red, okay, and blue, and you know, and you fill the little blocks and little squares, second grade, right? And you have to show your knowledge of colors. I looked in my desk, no crayons. There were no crayons, you know? And I looked at my friend, can I borrow your crayon? No, you can't. No one would loan me their crayons, you know? And I tried to get her attention. I haven't got the crayons, teacher, you know? Nothing. She wouldn't pay attention to me. So I said, what am I going to do? So I got the paper with my pencil, and I created a grid, okay? And if it was zigzag, I put that's yellow. It was polka dots, okay? And in other words, like green. And then I created rayitas, you know? So I created a grid over here, and then I filled in all of the different, the handout, the squares and the round circle that she gave me, with all my different combinations. Okay, I'm 7 years old, and I'm doing a grid, okay, with symbolic colors. I had an impression, I go, what could green look like? Well, son rayitas, you know. What's blue look like? Water. So these are waves, okay? And what's red look like? Well, it's relámpagos, you know, that's red. Anyway, I did that, and then she goes down the line, and she got my paper and picked it up, and she says, what's this? And I said, well, I'm trying to explain to you, I didn't have any crayons. Well, this isn't red. This isn't blue. What is this? This is nothing. What's the matter with you? And I said, the teacher's dumb. You know what I'm saying? I didn't take it personally. I didn't say, she could have said, well, you're dumb, Mexican, what's the matter with you? ¿Qué traes? You don't know shit, you know? But no, I said, something's the matter with this teacher. It's not me, it's her. But I don't remember her name. I don't remember her name. Other teachers, as I was going up the ladder, you know, up in grammar school, they discovered I could do art, so they would put my pictures on the wall. And some of the kids would be real jealous. The Anglo kids especially, why are you putting Luis pictures up for all the time? You know? But I'm grateful to them. I'm grateful to them because they gave me cariño. Cariño. And I've since discovered that that's the most important trait that teachers have got to have toward their students. You got to love your students. This is a racist world. So if you have a racist teacher that doesn't like black children, doesn't like Mexican kids, or Filipinos, or even Anglos, turn it around. I don't like Anglo kids, you know. Then you're going to have problems. You're not going to be able to teach. You're just not going to be able to teach. And we discovered along the way. In the 7th grade, I had a Mr. Clark, and he was real good. He was a good teacher. I was his best. I was his best pupil, actually. I'm not bragging, I just was. But the thing is that I used to do the monitor, I used to hand out. And one day we had to do penmanship, and we had like, you know, ABCs, you know. And so I went around collecting papers. I had a cousin, my cousin Rafael. He was in the same class. He was a year older than me, so he was retarded during class. But he was sitting there, and so I'm going around collecting the papers, and I saw Rafael with his paper, and he went A, B, C, D. I realized, cabrón, you know, my primo doesn't know the ABCs, you know. And I looked at him, and Rafael goes, so I said, okay, man, what's that it? Okay. So I skipped him, you know. I didn't hand in his paper, you know. And after all, Rafael developed into a strapping, handsome young guy, you know. A drug dealer, actually. But Mr. Clark was a great teacher, and he should have been able to teach Rafael. I don't know what the problem was. But the thing is that after that year, we were out there picking papas by Bakersfield one morning. And it's, you know, you start at 4 o'clock in the morning because it gets hot real early. And I was out there with my whole family, Piscando papas. And if you've ever, anybody pick Piscando papas and you pick potatoes? No, well, that's good for you. It's a lousy, it's slave labor. And you get paid by the sack, you know, so you pick the papas and then before the digger comes around, you know, you have to finish your claim, your row, and then the checker comes along, you've got your ticket, and they check how many sacks you make. And at the end of the day, you get paid, you pay how many punches you're thinking. So the checker came down the row, you know, in the middle of that one morning, and I looked, and this guy in khaki comes up, and hey, it's my teacher, it's Mr. Clark. I said, wow, Mr. Clark, he's white, he's a white guy, you know, I said, what are you doing out here? He said, well, I gotta work, Louis. I got a family to support. I said, damn, my teacher, working in the fields with us. And I saw him as a human being, you know. But the thing is that it humanized him, and it humanized teachers, and I'm still grateful, again, all those teachers. My English teacher in high school is still my friend. I became his student in 1956. His name is Ed Farrell, Dr. Farrell. And he knows my wife and his wife, and we gather once a year. He's 87 years old, he's got cancer now, you know, but he's my friend. And he was my teacher, he was my speech teacher, and he's one of the reasons I became a writer, because he inspired me. Irish American, you know, Irish American, and he knew I was Mexican. You know, I had other teachers that didn't like the fact that I was Mexican, you know. And when I was in grammar, in the first year in high school, I had a teacher, she was my homeroom teacher and also my civics class. So I had 2 classes from her. And I got A+ from her. Two semesters, it was A+. And then we sat down, she was my counselor, and after the end of my freshman year, we had to decide what I was going to do for the rest of high school, and I said, I want to take college prep. And she says, do you think that's realistic, Louis? And I said, yeah, I want to go to college. Well, I don't know. She had given me 2 A+, right? And so along the way, I discovered teachers that saw potential, that pushed me, and then teachers that didn't, that couldn't see me. And I'll share another story for you. At the end of, I was a straight A student in high school. Okay, it's the 1950s. And in spite of that, I also did sports, did gymnastics. I also did theater in high school. You'd think, okay, by 1958 I'd be a prime candidate for a major university. So I became a candidate for a 4-year scholarship to Berkeley. And it was $5,000 to come to Berkeley. And when they decided, one of the judges came out of the room, and he called me over, and he says, I don't know if I should tell you this, but I'm going to tell you. He says, we had granted you the 4-year scholarship to Berkeley. And I said, well, what happened? He says, well, the dean of girls came in here, and she had a young lady, an Anglo young lady, who was her candidate. And he came in and convinced the judges that you couldn't afford to go to Berkeley. You know what the tuition was in 1958? And I think it was a semester. They were doing the semester system here then. $75 a semester. So I got screwed, you know. What I got was a $250 scholarship to go to San Jose State. And I discovered that the $250 scholarship came from the government of Mexico. And so I said to myself, I'm a Mexicano. So I became a Chicano. I don't regret going to San Jose State, you know. I could walk from there to my mother's house, have lunch, you know, it wasn't bad. They've given me an honorary doctorate since then. I still have friends, I still have dealings. They're doing Zoot Suit this year. I've done several plays there, that's not a problem. But I'm just talking about the kind of racism that is inherent in this system. And even though you get an education, as teachers, you're going to be faced with a lot of garbage that you have to plow through, okay? So I just want you to know that, because my life has been what it has been. It has been a struggle, I'm sure, Patricia. It has been a struggle. You know, we don't look, to a lot of people, we don't look intelligent. I have been asked to my face, can you read? I was a filmmaker already with my film that I was bringing back to a library. I had to borrow it. And it was a little late, and the librarian looked at me and said, look, we have a schedule here, young man. We have a schedule. You see this? Oh, can you read? No, I could have gotten really PO'd, you know, and I said, no, this is my film. What are you talking about? No. I said, no, yeah, I can read. Thank you. Sorry it's late. Y me fui, you know. In Hollywood, where you have to go and pitch ideas, okay? Even though I've had successes in Hollywood, that have been box office successes. I had one producer, after I went and pitched him an idea, he said, oh, okay. And before I left his office, he said, let me give you a piece of advice. He says, you're too articulate. You're too articulate. So, that's part of the matrix that we're working on, okay? This is what we're working through. And people are not going to see your entire human worth. But if you're a teacher, you never know who you're teaching. You're going to be out there, you're looking at all your kids. I'm not just talking about the Chicanitos, I mean everybody. You're going to be teaching black kids, you're going to be teaching Asian kids, you're going to be teaching Anglo kids. You know, you got to love them, man. You got to love them. That's the first responsibility of the teacher. Now, I'm an actor, playwright. I got to love my audience. If I hate my audience, man, I'll never get a play on, you know. I gotta love them, because I'm doing it for them, they're doing it for me. So it's the same way. You're gonna be a teacher, that's the first requirement. And when I just spoke the other night, I talked about the mind zero, you know, cuatro direcciones, each side here. The square, you know, the square is cuatro movimiento. This is cuatro movimiento. Now we olim. That's the motion of the universe, but it's the 4 columns that we use in our explorations in the teatro, in our exercises, the 20 Pasos de Dios. 5 steps in each. Body, heart, mind, spirit, vibration. And each of those has a breakdown. And so you go through the body to reach the emotions. You have to go through the emotions in order to reach the mind. And you go through the mind to reach the spirit. The mind used to say the universe is mind. The universe is mind. In order to touch the creator over here, you have to go through your mind. It's a consciousness. So, motion, physical motion. Emotion, emotion. The word is Latin. E means from, motion. So emotion comes from motion. What kind of motion? The motion of the heart. It beats. Movimiento. What the Aztecas called Orin. Orin gave us Yolot, which is the word for heart. And the destination of your life, the challenge was to turn your mortal heart, your Yolot, into a Yolteo, the deified heart. El corazón endiosado. Kind of like the Sacred Heart of Jesus, except it's not Christian, it's Maya. Yolteo, so that you become a deified heart. Well, you got to have a big heart to be able to deal with the world. Yes, there are immense problems. There's a lot of ignorance, a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, a lot of legislative and political gobbledygook you have to deal with in order to get your budgets. How do you do that? Big heart. You got to have the heart to get into it. So I think you get that, right? El corazón. El corazón, you learn through the heart. You learn through the heart. But you also learn through the body. And one of the things they've done to all of us, I know that when I started going to school, I mean, old school, like 19th century classrooms, I went to country schools where they had these rigid desks. And I'll never forget the 50s when they started replacing all those old desks with new desks, new schools. Now those schools are run down, man. In the barrios, they're really in bad shape. But it was the factory style, you know? And so you sat rigid. This This is how you sat in class. And all my Anglo teachers say, sit up, kids. Okay. Okay, now we're going to let you take a nap. But that was it. This is how you learned. And then when recess came, occasionally they let you go out and move around, you know. Now they've cut back athletics and the dance and all of that. But the fact is that we're not made just to sit. We're made to move. And the spiral is inherent in your spine, in the espinazo dorsal. This is your central nervous system, and it extends into your extremities, your extended nervous system, your peripheral nervous system. And you are always taking in sensations from the tips of your fingers to the tips of your toes, la mollera, and all of these are combining and coming up. Your coccyx all the way up, your spine to the cerebellum, the medulla oblongata at the base of the neck, and then to the rest of the brain. So learning is very much a tactile, physical process. And in order to seal the learning, you have to move. You have to dance. El indio dances his way to truth in a way that some intellectuals will never understand. You have inherited a system of education that is just barely beginning to realize some of these things. What you have inherited is a system of education that's based on the industrial model where you're supposed to sit and behave. Well, that is not the way that our ancestors used to teach in the Calmecacs, or the way they used to teach in their advanced society. Now, not everybody got an education back in pre-Columbian America. They had an economic stratified system, but the fact is that the knowledge that was transmitted to an educational system that took account of the whole human being. So if you were a scribe in the ancient Mayan cultures, chances are you were also a dancer. Chances are you were also royalty. Chances are you were also an artist. You were a sculptor, you were a painter, you were a muralist. All of this was put together. Scholarship was connected, the ability to be able to write, to use Mayan hieroglyphics, which is really the only writing system that existed in the pre-Columbian world. It's a highly advanced form of writing that requires artistic skill and requires a knowledge of mathematics and requires a knowledge of movement. So some of these scribes were also dancers, and they were also ball players. And so we use the ball a lot, the ball. And we're not just being abstract in our teaching. We have workshops that we've developed over the last 50 years that are now being applied in schools. For the last 10 years, we've had a migrant ed program in the Salinas Valley. We have been proving every summer that you can take migrant kids and teach them to these techniques, and when they go back to school in the fall, they're better students. We have the track record. We've proven it. The Monterey County Office of Education does not need proof from us. They're convinced they're doubling up on our program. We also have a charter school that we are directly involved with in San Jose. It so happens to be, it's called the Luis Valdez Leadership Academy, excuse me for that self-reflection, but they want to name it that. But what we've done is incorporated our workshop, our Vibrant Being workshop, into the teaching. Right now it's just 9th graders. It's on the east side, it's in the barrio. Right now, actually it's in another high school right now that teaches primarily Vietnamese students. They will get their own school eventually, but it's part of the National Hispanic University Foundation. And so it's a new high school. We started with 9th graders. Next year we're going to double because we're going to bring in sophomores. So 9th graders are going to become sophomores, and then they're going to become juniors, and finally, eventually they're going to graduate as seniors. They are being taught the techniques of El Teatro Campesino as part of their preparation for curriculum. They're also being taught the sciences and literature, everything else that goes with education. But what's interesting is that we were invited into the process to introduce our techniques into the learning process and the preparation of high school students. So there we are. We're starting with K through 12 We get 7 and 8-year-olds in our summer program. We've got little kids. And then at the end of the summer, they perform. And as I say, that impacts the rest of the school year. And they want to improve that. And then we are also extending into San Jose. We also have a touchstone with Millennium High School, another charter high school in Salinas, that is teaching video and television. Unfortunately, the Anglo kids got in there first because they saw it as an opportunity, and the Chicanos took a little bit longer to get in there, but we're trying to get some of those kids from Alisal district that are plagued with gangs and drive-by killings and stuff, and drugs, to get into this school so that they can learn something about the use of media and technology, you know, to express ideas. So I'm not just talking out of my hat. We're talking about in the last 50 years in Teatro Campesino, which began on the picket lines of the Delano grade strike. The objective was to teach farm workers. I went to Cesar Chavez and pitched him an idea for a theater up by and for farm workers. And he said, well, you know, there are no actors in Delano, there's no money. But first he said there's no money to do theater in Delano. And then there are no actors, there's no stage, there's no time to rehearse, we're on the picket line, you still want to do it? And I said, absolutely. So the Teatro Campesino was born on the picket lines, right on the picket lines. And our objective was to educate the farm workers about what the union was all about. What's a union contract? What is that? Campesinos didn't know. And I remember one day I was out there rapping, you know, and because we had to talk them out of the field. We couldn't beat them, we couldn't threaten them. So we had to convince them, pura perica, get the bullhorn. I was out there talking to the campesinos, and then the campesino saw me and came up to me and says, oye, ¿te puedo preguntar algo? Can I ask you something? And I said, yeah. Esa es una palabra que no conozco y quiero saber qué es. And I said, ¿qué es la palabra? You know, what did you hear? Dignidad. ¿Qué es dignidad? And I said, it's dignity. You don't know what dignity is? No. It's a respeto a sí mismo, you know what I mean? Self-respect. Oh, okay. And later on I said, no tienen dignidad ustedes, you know, later. And, so it was really funny, you know, but it was, the whole experience of educating people is the process of liberating people. And what it's all predicated on is what is the nature of the human being. And we're not pieces of meat. We're not even, in that sense, mortal, just mortal pieces. We're all mortal, but we're all not just mortal pieces of meat. We're vibrant beings. Our pre-Columbian ancestors, the Maya, called us uniquely. We are vibrant beings, vibrating with the universe. And because we are vibrating, and we're full of the power of the sun, the kin, which is the sol, with solar power, that's why we're warm. When we're dead, we go cold. The heat that you feel, your life, that's the power of the sun. You're connected to the sun. We're really literally hijos del sol, and we're connected to the sol. And so the question is, what is the nature of the human being? And if you go to a classical Western education, they're going to tell you, well, we are Homo sapiens, we're wise monkeys. You said, okay, I can see that. We're wise monkeys with cell phones. But we're also wise serpents. We're also serpents crawling out of our own skins. And what is the word for serpent? Can. Can, C-A-N, can. And it's not unrelated to the verb can. Can is the power to do. Can is the serpent power. The serpent power that is inherent in your spine, and the serpent power that is inherent in the spirals of your life, the wave principle. And once you learn how to tap into that wave principle, you learn how to tap into your own power. And so can is really an important poder. Sí se puede. ¿Cómo se puede? How can we come to power? By learning what we are and how we can tap into our own native power. There isn't any of us that hasn't been given gifts. This is why it's so tragic with our own people, sometimes parents, tell their children, cállate burro, ¿qué vas a saber tú? You know what I'm saying? Cállate, kitsch. In Mexico they do it. Estos indios, estos cabrones indios, ish, ya no los aguanto. You know, Mexico is bleeding itself because it doesn't respect its root. And so those of us, who descend from those indios that have managed to get across the border and get an education, suddenly say, wait a minute, we've been lied to for centuries. We are who we are, and we have something to give to America. We are America. And it's there, right there with all the other sciences. We're right there with China. We're right there with Europe. We're right there with Africa. We can give. We have something to give. When you realize that about yourself, then you can give. Then you can give to your students. And like I say, it's not necessarily limited by races, but I do think that we're talking about a real problem when you go into the Latino community. Too many dropouts. Too many autodesprecio, too much hatred, self-hatred. Our kids are out there not knowing who they are. They don't like school. They get bored. They say, nah, And so you as teachers are going to be confronted with the challenge of how do you keep these kids interested? ¿Cómo le haces? You know what I do, and I've taught. I have taught on many occasions. And even in college and universities, and I see people like starting to doze off after lunch or something, and I say, hey, wake up! We're learning here. So if you have to do that, do that. But more than anything, love your students, be vibrant when you teach them, and be emphatic about what you're trying to teach them. Trying to teach math, trying to teach science, trying to teach history, trying to teach cultural pride. Okay? You've got to become warriors. You are cultural warriors as teachers. And you got a big battle coming up in front of you. Don't take it for granted. Embrace it, love it, and we'll see where that takes us. The way out is through education. Educate, educate. Education means the way out. That's what it means. Lead out, Educar. You become the leader of the way out. It's the way out of the barrio, the way out of San Si Puedes, the way to self-realization. That's what you do. Okay, I'm going to stop here so you can ask questions if you have any. Okay? Is that good? Can we do that? All right. So I hope I provoked something in you, because we can take it from there. So we've got another 15 minutes or so to answer questions. Yes, Ruben.
No, just the concept of mania and work.
Oh, very good. Okay, mania. Mania is a really important concept. Mania. This is the Mayan word, Mayucateco, Patricia's language over here, for work. It's two words. Men means creer, crear, hacer. If you believe something, then you can create something. If you do something, it's because you believe something. Another way to say that is actions speak louder than words. Some people lie, they say I'm a generous guy, but no, your actions speak for yourself, Lo que haces me enseña lo que quién eres. But creer, crear, hacer, men. What's interesting is they say that Latin, is the root of a lot of English words like mental, like mind. Yucateco. Qué casualidad that the word for mind, for mente, in Yucateco is men. ¿Qué hubo? ¿Qué pasó? Maybe the archaeologists have got the calendar a little screwed. Maybe our ancestors were around a long time ago. We know that they discovered 1,000 years before anybody else. Why not the word man? ¿Qué pasó? Okay, so men, and ya means love and pain. If you feel love, you're going to feel pain. We're talking emotionally here. If you feel pain, you're going to feel love. So, to believe, to create, to do with love and pain. Creer, crear, hacer con amor y dolor. That is the Mayan definition of work. But as it turns out, it is creative work. We live in a world that has turned work into drudgery. Are you talking farm workers, or are you talking factory workers, or are you talking people that are flipping hamburgers at McDonald's? Where work has become a job, it's become a function. And so the worker, that's why the society doesn't like to talk about workers. There was nothing more strange when we started the Teatro Campesino than the idea of a farm workers theater. How can you have a farm workers theater? Farm workers are the low end of the social spectrum over here. And theater, well, that belongs to the educated, the privileged, the upper class, the fine arts. How can you combine farm workers with theater? How can you turn a sow's ear into a silk purse? You know what I'm saying? And yet, this is why. Because we are indígenas and creative work. We're workers. People are not intended to be wage slaves. They're intended to be creativos, creative work. So all of your little kids in school are already creators. And what happens is that the creativity gets drained out of them. Because society needs them to be drones. Society needs them to be cogs in the machine. Society needs them to be beasts of burden, to become farm workers. And how do you do that? You insult them. You line up the Chicano and say, you stupid Mexicans, what do you guys know about? You don't know anything. Can't even speak the language. Get to work. Picking up stuff. And if you don't behave, we're going to put you in prison and make some money off of you. Which is what the prison system has become for Latinos and African Americans. African Americans have the same problem. You black people, oh shit. People say about Obama, he's the worst president we've ever had. Can you imagine a lie like that? I know we have problems with immigration, you know, he said there in the White House. But the thing is that Obama, he isn't even a total black, he's a white man. He's as white as he is black. What's the problem? But because he is kind of African looking, people say, oh man, he just doesn't have it. Doesn't have the stuff to be president. And why? That's the system saying, I need people to be drones. I need people to be nobodies, okay? And you guys are going in, you're teachers, you're going to teach your students, we're somebody. Okay, that's a challenge for you. And in addition to the fact that you got to prove to your administrators in the future that you're worthy teachers, that you're going to fight for your students. That's another one. And then the other one is, in la que Rupa, is that what we're talking about? Yes.
Use that tape.
Yes.
That's right. Okay. In la H. Tú eres mi otro yo. You are my other me. Tú eres mi otro yo. Si te amo y te respeto a ti, me amo y me respeto yo. If I love and respect you, I love and respect myself. Si te hago daño a ti, me hago daño a mí. If I do harm to you, I do harm to myself. So I'll tell you about my favorite teachers. In Lakesh, when they were practicing, they looked at, tú eres mi otro yo. I was a brown little kid, maybe they were white, doesn't matter. You're my little kid. I'm going to teach you. The California education system had problems since the minorities came in. When they were all white people, when I was born, California had 6 million people in 1940. 6 million, that was it. We are now at about 40 million, hurtling toward 50 million within 15, 20 years. And most of those, 50% of those are going to be Latinos. So what's happening, the politicians in Sacramento says, we don't know we can afford an educational system to educate so many people. But when I was a kid, there were only 750,000 Mexicanos. We weren't even a million yet. So by accident, I got taught, okay? I was there with the other Anglo kids and, well, I got taught, that's all. I was no threat. It's not that way now. We need Latino teachers that care because we have a lot more Latino students. You know, and at this point, Mexico isn't helping. we can't rely on our native origins to help us out. Mexico has its own problems. There's too many people who hate themselves in Mexico. And they're cutting off heads, and it's corrupt. It's been corrupted since Españoles came. And they didn't give the Indios a break, you know? So the idea then is, and it doesn't help from the United States, if it doesn't come from the generation of Mexicanos and the children of Mexicanos, the children of Latinos, that have been able to seep up through the American system and get to Berkeley, okay? You guys are gold. You guys are the promise of your community. You guys are the hope of not just our community, the Latinos, but of a whole country, a whole Latin America. They're looking at you. Whether you can feel their eyes on you or not, they're looking at you. And they're saying, mijitos, mijitas, go for it. Become teachers. Bring us some learning. Teach our kids. Teach us about the world. But it starts with in that age. You got to believe that you're an extension of your community, and the community is an extension of you. And I'm not just talking about Latinos. You got to teach Asians, you got to teach African Americans, you got to teach Anglos. And you got to love them. You got to love them. That's it. That's what I think.
Would you take a question from a student?
Sure, I'll take questions. Okay. Yes.
When I was reading your the interview that you had, we were talking about how when you initiated the Teatro Campesino, it stood out to me that you said that there was not a lot of female actors. So like, why do you think that was, and like, how did that change? Or
There was no sense that of theater among the campesinos. They'd never been exposed to theater. What theater? No había teatro. They knew the movies, el cine, they knew the radio, they knew las carpas, and they knew circos. So when we came together in Delano, they used to call us el circo. And the actors were not, actores is not a word that came to mind right away. It was, son payasos. Ustedes son payasos. And so we asked campesinos, let us cast your daughters, let us cast your wives. No. ¿Cómo voy a permitir que mi señora se meta ahí con ustedes payasos? O que mi hija salga con ustedes allá. No, señor. So we got cut off. We had a play once. I said, okay, well, let's go on the spiritual side. And let's do a Virgen de Guadalupe play, a symbolic one. And what we had was, we used a slide. We've got high-tech all of a sudden. One slide and a projector of the Virgen de Guadalupe. And then I used to wave my hand in front of the lens. So the Virgen used to, you know. That's high-tech, I'm telling you, you know. One time we were rehearsing there in Delano, and Cesar Chavez walked into the room, and he goes, and he looked at, oh, I thought she was appearing to me, you know. But anyway, so the Virgen was going to appear to a campesino and talk to him about, ¿por qué no te defiendes, hijo mío? You know, just using that angle. And so there was a señora, a campesina, madre de casa y todo, from Mexico, who had a lovely voice, you know, and she'd had some acting experience in Mexico. So I asked her, can you help us? And she said, sí, cómo no. And so she said she would be off stage doing the voice on a microphone for the music. That's all. She didn't have to appear, just her voice. So we said, I was happy, man. We're going to do this at the Friday night meeting. But she came to me and she says, ¿sabes qué? Me da mucha pena, pero no puedo hacerlo. I'm sorry, I can't do this. And I said, why not? He says, bueno, hay mucha plática en la vecindad aquí. There's too much chisme, you know, going on. And they're saying que no puedo dar la voz, no puedo hacer la voz de la Virgen porque soy madre y no soy virgen. You know, so we couldn't get another woman to do that. And so we didn't do that after, because we wouldn't get a woman's voice. And it got that serious, you know what I'm saying? That silly. It wasn't until later on, we had one campesina who used to sing beautifully. There was a lot. She could get out and sing. But acting took a little more pressure. It wasn't until we left Delano in 1967 and moved to Del Rey, a town about 60 miles east of Delano, that we began to recruit los hijos de campesinos. We had been through that town in 1966 during the March of Sacramento. And Juan Lupe Trujillo and her mother had seen El Teatro perform in her town. When we came to Del Rey, I met Lupe again. She came to a performance in 1967. And then the following year, I was asked to teach a class at Fresno State called La Raza. I think it was the first Chicano studies class in the state and in the country. And Lupe Trujillo was one of my students. And so I recruited her for the teatro. And there she is, the first Chicana to act with El Teatro Campesino. She became my wife in 1969. We've been married for 45 years, and we have 3 sons. They're not kids anymore, you know, they're in their 40s and late 30s. But they're all playwrights, directors, as well as actors. Our oldest son is working on the new Star Wars movie. He's an assistant editor. High tech, all digital, just to show that Chicanos can do it too, you know. And then we have another son who lives and works out of San Juan, but he's been in LA lately. He's a writer-director, Kinan. He also was a Berkeley student. We brought him here to go through. And he'll be teaching, he teaches workshops here occasionally. He'll be directing también in San State. I mean, he directs all over. And our youngest son, Lakin, who was born the day that I finished Zutsu. And Lupe and I were in a race. She was going to give birth to our 3rd son. And I had to turn in the script. So I finished my script after a 72-hour jag, you know, and flew to Los Angeles, and then Lupe called me, and she, as we sat down to a first production meeting, and she said, my water broke. So I didn't even have time to do the production meeting. I got back in the car, drove to LAX and flew back, and by the time I got back to Salinas, where she was in the hospital, our 3rd son had been born. And he lives in Chicago. He's a writer, director, and also a playwright. And by extension, it would bother me because, you know, the theater is not the most secure place. But there's so much work to be done that, como decía Cesar Chavez, hay más tiempo que vida. And one generation is not going to do it. One generation is not going to solve it. You know, Benito Juarez had to learn how to read and write on the sly. You know, a priest showed him how to read and write because they didn't allow Indios. We're talking the 1900s, you know, the 1800s rather. They didn't allow Indios to be educated in Mexico. And so he had to learn on the secret. Well, mira lo que pasó. You know, he became a judge, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, President of Mexico. Because and when he said, el respeto al derecho ajeno es la paz, peace is the respect for the rights of others, he was echoing in Lakesh, tú eres mi otro yo. Si te amo y te respeto a ti, me amo y me respeto yo. If I do harm to you, I do harm to myself. So that root, the Indígena root, kept coming out. And so, you know, I don't blame campesinos for walking across the desert if they have to get to the United States. And things are not perfect here. We face a lot of obstacles. But there's opportunity to get educated and opportunity to turn around and help your community. And that's really all that's all about. Okay, I think we're done, no? ¿Sí? Muy bien, gracias entonces.
Thank you very much.
He has a symbol. Oh, lovely. Oh, my God. Oh, mira, my favorite cup suddenly. Mira. Oh, perfect. Woo, okay.
Thank you so much.
Muchísimas gracias.
I want